Tonight, we are talking about miracles. Miracles are supernatural displays of massive power. Gentlemen, we have to be very careful how we talk about demonstrations of power because we are fallen creatures, and when we get around great power, we get wrong ideas and distracted very easily. If I told you this John Deere is running a 20 horsepower engine, and I pointed out the 54-inch mowing deck, some of you are already thinking, that's nothing. Mine runs a 25 horsepower and a 60-inch deck. That's comparison. That's us always looking for more power. Some of you started dreaming, vividly imagining it mowing through a pristine streak of green, through the variegated orange leaves on your lawn. That's us letting our minds drift and swoon around power, drunk on power, forgetting we are in Bible study. It's okay to get a little thrill from horsepower, but it is a problem if all you seek is entertainment. That's where we are at in our Unexpected King study. It's time for a display of power. It's time for miracles to happen. Not for entertainment, but to send a divine message. Matthew has established the genealogy, the fulfillment of prophecy, the divine baptism, victory over Satan in the wilderness, the theologic qualifications in the Sermon on the Mount. Now commences a demonstration of power, the miracles of chapter 8 and 9. We will study miracle after miracle, all divinely powered and all attesting to the King's rightful authority. In our first division tonight, we will argue miracles attest to Jesus' divine authority. In the second division, we will see the responses to the demonstrations of power. We'll explore some of the pitfalls about being around power and talking about power. In that second division, we'll see that Jesus' authority is questioned and opposed. We are going to see a number of responses to Jesus' miracles that are all lacking, deficient, and for us, very instructive. Our doctrine is faith, particularly in relation to miracles and divine authority. Please open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 8. Gentlemen, this is God's word you are holding, the greatest miracle we experience every day. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately, he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift Moses commanded as testimony to them." Okay, here's our first miracle in a series of 10. Please note that our author Matthew disregards chronologic order and arranges the miracles in a thematic way, developing an argument for his Jewish readers and us. He's preventing us from interpreting displays of power in a crass manner and organizes them to deepen our understanding. We can also be helped by holding in mind the purposes of miracles, so you can look at them across the individual miracle stories. So, do we see in this miracle of healing authenticating the message of the gospel? Yes. The second one, does this miracle bear witness to the kingdom of heaven beginning? Sure, because healing is a glimpse of when we will be restored to our glorified, perfect, disease-free bodies. Third one, for sure, Jesus cures him in all three dimensions of human malady: disease, illness, sickness. Disease is cured. That's the Mycobacterium leprae. The illness is the first person bodily and mental experience of suffering, which was lifted. And finally, and perhaps most easily recognized, is the sickness. That is the societal expectations, including the rejection, shame, isolation, all removed. Disease, illness, and sickness. That's the three dimensions of human malady, all totally restored. Okay, the fourth one makes me laugh. Remove hindrances to ministry. He was told not to tell anyone. Instead, he starts a super evangelical ministry, and then he tells everyone. So I guess he had no hindrances to ministry. Do you wonder why Jesus asked him to keep quiet? Remember, we have to be very careful how we talk about demonstrations of power. Jesus may not have wanted the man to speak of healing in order to temper the crowd's hasty and superficial acceptance of him just as a miracle worker and not fully God. Recall, in John's Gospel, after Jesus feeds 5,000 and after the people saw the miracle, they intended to make Jesus king by force. So he withdrew again to a mountain by himself. John 6:15. Please notice what is not on the list. This was not a presentation of a miracle to compel faith in the one who receives the miracle. That's off the table. That's not even a live option for misinterpretation, because the leper already came with faith. Same situation with the centurion. He came with faith. I believe Jesus is opposed to superficial faith by sight. The author of Hebrews says, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Not one of the miracles is for entertainment or thrills, thus minimizing incidental, superficial professions of faith. Sounds like protections for false conversions are in place. Let's see where the text leads us. Verse 5. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking for help. "Lord," he said, "my servant lies at home, paralyzed, suffering terribly." Jesus said to him, "Shall I come and heal him?" The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, "Truly, I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west, and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, let it be done just as you believed it would." And the servant was healed at that moment. Let's run through some of the purposes of this miracle. Does this miracle bear witness of the kingdom of heaven beginning? Yes. This is a taste of Jesus' reign and power of heaven on earth. The miracle helped those in need, the paralyzed servant and the requesting centurion. Does it glorify God? Absolutely. The highlight of the story is the faith of the centurion. His faith is a striking contrast to the unreceptiveness of the Jews. Remember, as a Roman, he was a Gentile, another outsider, like the man with leprosy. He was more than an outsider, as he typically would have been hated by the religious establishment and would have never been expected to have true faith. Nevertheless, Jesus marveled at his faith. This is one of the 2 times when Jesus was said to have marveled. Both times occurred, importantly, at opposite ends of the faith spectrum. The other time was in Mark 6:6, when Jesus was marveling at the unbelief of the Jews because they remembered Jesus as a carpenter. They could not believe. That's the dark end of the spectrum. Let's look at the commendable end. Let's try to capture exactly what the centurion got right that Jesus had not found in anyone else in Israel. In the centurion's retelling of authority in the Roman system, we conclude this centurion recognized authority when he saw it. He recognized, submitted, and fully understood what authority could do. This centurion understood he was a man under authority, which is a clear and humble statement that his actual and unimpeded power to act was bestowed upon him from Caesar, from above. It's not his power he's wielding. It's the power of the one who sent him. By twice addressing Jesus as Lord, the centurion is not just being polite. He actually affirms the divine lordship of Jesus. And even when he did not exactly know how Jesus' supernatural powers functioned, he had a faith in the process of delegation, the bidding, the saying of the word. You get it? Jesus' miracles prove his divine authority, and the centurion recognized the authority. He knew Jesus' works are divine, and the delegation of authority from God the Father to the Son will continue on down the line. That's faith ahead of its time, and it's commended as the greatest. Later, we'll hear the contrasting "you men of little faith" and pick up some pointers as the disciples get reprimanded. The miracle concludes with Jesus now encouraging the centurion directly for his faith and pronouncing the healing as you believed. Thus, the greatest faith in Israel is grown even greater by God's grace. That, my brothers, is exactly how our faith grows too. In the next section, Jesus arrives at Peter's home, where he heals Peter's mother-in-law with a touch. She apparently took the phrase "removal of hindrance to ministry" to heart, because at once she got up and waited on Jesus. Please note a theme across the first 3 miracles. Jesus shows mercy and compassion to the lowest and the most devalued in society, the leper, the hated Roman soldier, and women. Self-righteous Jewish men of the time would have been challenged to do the same, and perhaps we are now. Let's accept that challenge. Okay, now something very different happens in verse 16. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out the spirits with a word and healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. You see it? All of a sudden, he is doing mass healings. It's kind of jarring. Matthew started us with individual cases that we could mentally process. Now it's many and all. Jesus is performing miracles without vetting for individual belief or valid circumstances. That rattled me at first. It is an instinct maybe many of us have, that generosity should go to the deserving. And what is more generous than a miracle? Perhaps that's our finite minds and us operating in a fallen world with finite resources. Jesus doesn't run his miracles like we run our 501c charitable organizations. Jesus has a divine purpose by these mass miracles to bear witness that the kingdom of heaven has begun for everyone in history. We are greatly helped with the verse from Isaiah 53:4. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. This verse pulls our perspective back past individual healings, past mass healings, to the largest view of healing, the whole of history. Our infirmities and our diseases refer all the way back to original sin. This is about the entire redemptive plan of history. The current heavens and earth have long been subject to God's curse because of mankind's sin. All creation has been groaning, as in the pains of childbirth, as it awaits the fulfillment of God's plan. Heaven and earth will pass away, and they will be replaced by a new heaven and a new earth. In the new creation, sin will be totally eradicated, and there shall be no more curse. That, my brothers, is the reason for miracles. Jesus is declaring, through miracles, his divine purpose and divine authority. That's our first principle. Jesus' miracles prove his divine authority. Jesus' miracles prove his divine authority. What does it take for you to recognize authority? Do you insist on demonstrations of power before you could submit? The centurion didn't. What kinds of structures of formal or moral authority are you participating in? To me, it seems many of our societal structures of authority are eroding. Who hasn't seen parents yelling at a referee? Do you think your kids have a hard time respecting authority? How can you support structures of authority without resorting to crass displays of power? Okay, we have seen Jesus demonstrate absolute authority over disease. Thus, he claims absolute lordship of those who follow him. Matthew will present, in the following verses, less than ideal responses to the claim of authority. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens, and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." We are not told from the passage what the motive of the teacher of the law, the scribe. We don't know his motive. Surely he knows of the miracles, and perhaps he has witnessed some of them. On the surface, his statement of commitment to follow Jesus sounds laudable. Notice, he does not even ask for anything from Jesus. In a very courageous and public way, he is turning from his association with the Pharisees toward Christ. Jesus, being omniscient, tells us, however, that by his response, this situation is similar to Peter's, when he said, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." Matthew 26:33. It is a hurried proclamation. Jesus knew Peter's and the scribe's mind better than they did. Jesus pointedly conveys the Son of Man does not have even the basic comforts of life, like a home or property. no place to lay his head, may also mean, on a spiritual level, that there is no true, lasting rest for Jesus or his disciples until glory, when they leave this earth. None of us will truly rest until heaven. Jesus' words certainly are precise and efficient for the scribe's situation. He was too eager for such a blanket declaration of commitment, and Jesus rightly warns of the costs, including self-denial, sacrifice, and likely suffering. The other man is identified as a disciple and seems to put forward a reasonable request. After all, are we not to honor our father and mother? However, in the Middle East, the phrase "bury my father" refers to a son's responsibility to help the father in the family business until the father dies. At that point, the inheritance is distributed. So the request is not entirely selfless. Perhaps he counted the costs of being a follower and simply wanted to mitigate and curtail some of the pain. That seems okay to me. In Christian lingo, we'd say it's stewardship. But Jesus commands for this man immediate submission, explaining the spiritually dead can later bury the physically dead. Let an unsaved person do that work, Jesus is implying. I have work only you can do. It takes godly wisdom to distill it down to take-home truth. I believe it is this: we must come to Jesus on his terms, not our own. Let's continue. Verse 23. When he got into the boat and his disciples followed him, suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." The disciples must have wondered, how can Jesus possibly sleep? Why is he not afraid like us? They woke him and got the miracle of safety they requested when Jesus suddenly changed the weather with a word. But they also got a gentle rebuke for not having enough faith, for having little faith. Let's explore. How can we define faith? Faith is an attitude whereby a man abandons all reliance in his own efforts to obtain salvation, be they deeds of piety, of ethical goodness, or anything else. That seems to comprise the Christian view of faith. It also, in this situation, where seasoned sailors probably tried everything they could to save the ship before they abandoned their own efforts and woke their master, seems to have that same flavor. By his rebuke, though, Jesus is suggesting they could have possessed the faith to act safe in the storm, having already experienced over and over again his compassion and his power. No doubt it's true if Jesus said it, but why does it still seem like a stretch to me? I'll answer that later. For now, I still see the disciples ending this one favorably when they responded in verse 27 with amazement and shouts of joy that nature obeys him. That indicates hope for growing faith. After demonstrating power over the natural world, Matthew directs us to a demonstration of power over the supernatural world of demons. Verse 28. When he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Remember, Matthew, in the power of the Spirit, has curated this collection of miracles and now presents the most powerful and complex miracle for our understanding. We are ready. We won't mishandle it. Okay, first, you appreciate. This is one of the most powerful displays, just surely by the numbers. Mark 5:13 tells us the herd was 2,000 animals. That's 2,000 demons inside 2 men. Wow, that's amazing exorcism power. We will see the disciples fail to drive out a single demon from a boy later in chapter 17. It's a beginner's story. You gotta start somewhere, right? Next, we recognize the theology and eschatology of these demons is on point. Right away, the demons recognize they are talking to God. Demons have great knowledge of God's nature and power as fallen angels existing before the creation of earth itself. Thus, they submitted to whatever Jesus will choose to do with them next because they know their place. They also know end-time events, eschatology. They anticipate the appointed time when they will be thrown into the lake of fire, and they knew it was not now. As spiritual creatures, they are not limited by time or space. They can assume different forms. I'll cut it off there. I warned you, as men, we get easily fascinated by powerful things, and demons are extremely powerful beings. Let's focus on the purpose of the miracles and the results in this case. Jesus and the gospel are authenticated. The kingdom of heaven has begun with evacuating the demons. 2 men are relieved of their demons. Number 4 is awesome. Removal of hindrance to ministry. Do you think having 1,000 demons would hinder your ministry? We learn in Mark 5:18, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Wow, a ministry is born. I'm sorry, I can't just leave you there on a high note, because the passage ends with a very foreboding, they pleaded with him to leave their region. That is the first opposition to Jesus recorded in the Gospels. And you men know, and Jesus knew, the opposition will grow to hate, and the hate will ultimately lead to murder. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of it, right there. The whole town came out. What did they misunderstand about the miracle? We might guess they were shocked by the massive display of power and maybe just flooded, no mental capacity available to accept Christ's authority. Maybe they felt ashamed for having abandoned their fellow man out in the wild in chains. Maybe it's something embarrassing about owning pigs in front of Jesus. I don't know. And you can tell I'm just guessing like everyone else. But what we do know for sure, Jesus' miracles are an invitation for relationship. It's an invitation to recognize his authority and join him. God's plan has a people, and miracles are a powerful invitation. Misunderstanding the miracle as a show for entertainment or getting caught up in the amazement misses the invitation. Getting scared by the miracle or embarrassed around Jesus' righteousness can make you miss the bid for true relationship. Let's hang on to that as our final principle. Jesus' miracles are an invitation for true relationship. Jesus' miracles are an invitation for true relationship. How can you recognize Jesus calling to be closer to him by his miracles in your life? It's reasonable to push back a little and say, Carlo, miracles like that don't happen in my life. I hear you. But brother, may I take you back to the boat? Sometimes we miss seeing the miracles. The greatest miracle of all is in the boat. The incarnation, the incomprehensible act of God becoming human, is the greatest miracle of all. And that miracle is in the boat. How did the disciples miss it? Obviously, I missed it, and you did too, if you thought Jesus was a little harsh, saying that they had little faith. Now I get it. What are you doing fretting over a little 25 horsepower miracle when the greatest miracle ever is with you? Brothers, I have to tell you, look no further. The greatest miracle is in your boat. It's the Bible. We don't have to be looking out for modern day miracles. Last night, I read about Jan Hus and his martyrdom for this miracle. I pray for all of us that we will grow to esteem the Bible like that and recognize it as our miracle in the boat.